Somewhere between the last frost of spring and the first cool night of September, you pulled a plant out of your garden, shook the soil off the roots, and threw it over the fence. You probably did it 200 times, and in the course of doing that, over one single season, you threw away more protein than most people buy at the meat counter in a month. The plant in question is not rare, it is not exotic, it has no Latin name you need to memorize, and no seed you need to order. It comes up on its own, every year, in the same beds you are trying to keep clean, and the only tool anybody in this country has ever pointed at it is a hoe. In half the rest of the world, that same plant is sold in bunches at the market, and has its own name in 4 languages. My name is Wendell. I pulled that plant out of my own beds for 50 years before anybody told me what it was. So before we go further, let me be clear about the number we are all going to be arguing with. A good lean steak, cooked, runs about 29 grams of protein and 100 grams of meat. That is a serious number. That is the number every plant in this video has to stand next to. And I will tell you plainly that some of them beat it and some of them do not. And the ones that do not are not losing. They are being measured with the wrong ruler. There are 2 honest rulers in this business, and every list like this one uses whichever ruler flatters it and never says which. I am going to use both, and I am going to tell you exactly when I switch. So here are 10 plants. And I have not sorted them by how much protein they hold, because that is the trick everybody else plays. I have sorted them by one thing only: how much work it takes to get the thing onto your plate. Number 1 is a whole season of labor and a threshing floor. Number 10 is something you have poisoned. Number 8 is the one on the thumbnail, and it is probably in your garden this evening. Before the first one, the ruler, because everything else hangs off it. 29 grams per 100 grams. That is lean sirloin, cooked, trimmed. If you take the same steak raw, before any water cooks out of it, you get something closer to 19 or 20 grams. And if it is a fattier cut like a ribeye, the protein per 100 grams goes down further, because fat is taking up room that muscle used to have. That difference matters more than it sounds like it should. When somebody tells you a seed has 36 grams of protein per 100 grams, they are talking about a dry seed with almost no water in it. And when they compare that to cooked meat, they are comparing a thing that has been dried to a thing that has been cooked and calling it a fair fight. It is not quite a fair fight. So through the first half of this list, when I say a number, I will tell you it is the dry weight, and I will let you decide how impressed to be. And then at number 6, the whole comparison is going to fall apart on us. And that is where this gets interesting. Number 1 is the soybean, and it is number 1 because it asks the most of you. 36.5 grams of protein per 100 grams of dry seed. That is the single biggest number in this video, and it beats a cooked lean steak outright with room to spare. There is nothing else in a home garden that does that. The catch is everything that stands between the seed and your supper. You plant in late spring, you grow it all summer, you wait for the pods to rattle, you pull the plants, you dry them under cover, and then you have to get the beans out of the pods, which on a garden scale means a tarp, a sheet, and a certain amount of stomping. And after all that, you still cannot eat them because raw soybeans are not food. They have to be soaked and cooked properly. What you end up with is a jar of dry beans in the pantry that will keep for years and that carry more protein per spoonful than anything else you can grow. Is it worth it? For most gardeners, no. I am telling you the number because the number is real and because it sets the ceiling. Everything after this asks less of you, and most of it gives you nearly as much. Number 2 is the pumpkin seed. And this one is my favorite item on the list because you are already growing it and you are already throwing it out. 30 grams of protein per 100 grams of dried kernels. That is a cooked steak, matched and passed, out of the slimy handful you scrape into the bin every October. Think about what that means in terms of work. You did not plant anything extra. You did not give up a foot of bed. You grew the pumpkin for the pumpkin, and the protein was sitting in the middle of it the whole time. And the only reason you have never eaten it is that shelling pumpkin seeds by hand is miserable, and everybody quits after 20 of them. Which is why the move here is a variety, not a technique. There are pumpkins whose seeds come with no shell at all. The trait turned up on its own in Austria almost 150 years ago and has been bred into a handful of varieties since. Kakai is the one most seed catalogs carry. Styrian and Lady Godiva are the older names. Grow one of those and the whole job changes. Scoop, rinse, dry them on a towel for a day, roast them low, and you have a jar of something you would otherwise pay a good deal of money for at the store. The flesh of a hulless pumpkin is not much for eating. That is the trade. You are growing that plant for the seed, and it is worth a hill. Number 3 is the peanut, and this one costs you a season, but almost no attention. 26 grams per 100 grams, raw. That is under a cooked steak and comfortably over a raw one, and out of a plant that fixes its own nitrogen and asks for nothing but sun. The thing that decides whether you can do this is not cold hardiness, because peanuts die at the first frost like a tomato does. It is length of season. You need about 120 frost-free days at minimum, and more than that for the big types. Valencia is the one to grow if your summers are short, because it comes in around 95 days, and it is the type the extension services point home gardeners toward from Texas clear up to the Canadian line. The other requirement is the soil, and it is not negotiable. Peanuts flower above ground, and then the flower stalk bends over and drives down into the dirt, and the peanut forms underground at the end of it. That stalk cannot push through heavy clay or packed ground. Loose, sandy, deep. If your soil is heavy, a raised bed of sand and compost solves it. Harvest is the best afternoon of the gardening year, by the way. You pull the whole plant, and the peanuts come up hanging off the roots like ornaments. Number 4 is the dry bean, and here I mean the bean you let go all the way, not the green bean you pick in July. 24 grams per 100 grams dry. Same neighborhood as raw beef, out of a plant nearly everybody already grows. The difference between a green bean and a dry bean is nothing but patience. You stop picking. That is the entire technique. You let the pods swell and go leathery and then go papery, and you leave them on the plant until they rattle when you brush past. Then you pull them, spread them somewhere dry for a week, and shell them out on a winter evening. The plant makes the same protein either way. Picking green just means you eat it before it is finished. And a row you would have gotten tired of picking in August turns into a jar of beans that will still be good in 3 years. A word of warning that I am going to keep until later because it deserves its own moment and because doing this wrong will genuinely put you in bed for a day. Dry beans have a requirement. We will get to it before the end. Number 5 is the sunflower, and it is the easiest thing in the first half of this list by a wide margin. 21 grams per 100 grams of dried kernels, below a steak, right about level with raw beef. You already know how to grow a sunflower. A child can grow a sunflower. The whole trick with growing them for seed rather than for looks is choosing a seed type rather than an ornamental type, because a lot of the pretty ones are bred for pollen-free branching and small heads, and you want one big head with fat, striped seed in it. The real fight is birds, and the answer is a paper bag or a piece of cheesecloth over the head once the petals drop. Tie it at the neck and leave it. The head keeps ripening in there and the jays cannot get at it. Cut the head when the back of it goes from green to yellow-brown and the seeds have gone hard. Hang it upside down somewhere dry for a couple of weeks and then rub the seeds out with your thumbs. That is the first half. And now I have to stop, because if I keep going the way I have been going, I am going to lie to you. Number 6 is the green pea, and beside it, the green soybean, the one sold as edamame. 5 grams of protein per 100 grams for the pea, 13 for the edamame. Look at what just happened. We went from 36 to 5. On the ruler I have been using, the pea is a joke. A steak has 6 times the protein a pea does. If I were making the sort of video that is trying to sell you something, the pea would not be on this list because it makes the list look bad. But something is wrong with the ruler, and you probably felt it a while ago. 100 grams of dry soybeans is not a portion. It is half a cup of hard little pellets with the water taken out. 100 grams of peas is a handful off the vine that you would eat standing up and not think about. We have been comparing a concentrate to a food, and the concentrate wins every time, and that tells us nothing about what to have for supper. So here is the second ruler, and it is the one that answers the question you actually have. Not how many grams of protein are in 100 grams of this thing. Instead of the calories you get from eating it, what share of them is protein? That number does not care about water. It does not care whether something has been dried or cooked. It tells you what you are really buying with your appetite. And on that ruler, a ribeye steak comes in at about a third. A third of the calories in a ribeye are protein, and the rest is fat. A lean trimmed sirloin does much better, around 2/3, which is why lean beef has the reputation it has. Edamame lands near 40%, so a bowl of green soybeans out of your own garden delivers a higher share of its calories as protein than a ribeye does. The pea is lower, around a quarter, and I am leaving it on the list anyway, because a pea is the only thing here a person will eat 2 pounds of without being asked twice. From here down, that is the ruler, and it is the reason the rest of this list is leaves. Number 7 is the stinging nettle, and I've put it here because it is the first plant on this list that you did not plant. You will find a number quoted for nettle everywhere, and it is 34 grams of protein per 100 grams, which would put it above a steak and make it the strangest entry in this video. That number is real, and it is also not what you think. It is measured on dried leaf, ground to powder with all the water gone. Fresh nettle is mostly water like every other leaf. Bring that number back to the plant standing in the ditch, and you are looking at something in the range of 4 to 7 grams per 100 grams, which is very good for a green and is not a protein powder. I am telling you that because half the internet is not going to, and because you deserve to know when a number has been dried out before it was handed to you. What nettle actually is one of the most nutritious greens that will ever grow on your place without permission, and it comes up in early spring when nothing else is up. Handling is the whole skill. Long sleeves and rubber gloves to pick. Then either blanch it for 1.5 to 2 minutes and drop it in ice water, or dry it. Either one destroys the stingers completely. After that, it handles like spinach and tastes deeper than spinach, and nobody at the table will know what they are eating unless you tell them. Number 8 is the one from the thumbnail, and it is the reason I wanted to make this video. In this country, we call it pigweed. Its real name is amaranth. It is the plant you have been pulling out of your beds since you were old enough to be handed a hoe. 2.5 grams of protein per 100 grams of fresh leaf. On the old ruler, that is nothing. On the new ruler, it is 43% of its calories as protein, which puts it well ahead of a ribeye and in the same conversation as the leanest cut in the butcher's case. And the leaf is only half of it. The seed head that comes up at the end of summer is a grain, and that grain runs about 14 grams per 100 grams with an unusual amount of lysine in it, which is the one amino acid that wheat and corn are short of. That is a rare thing in a plant that nobody planted. The rest of the world never lost track of this. In the Caribbean, it is callaloo. In India, it is chowlai. Across Asia and Africa, it is a market vegetable with a dozen local names, grown on purpose, sold in bunches. And it was one of the main field crops of the Aztec world, planted alongside maize and beans and squash, listed in the tribute rolls, sold in the markets by variety. After the conquest, it went into decline, and it never came back the way maize did. You will hear that the Spanish banned it outright. I have looked, and I cannot find the decree, so I am not going to tell you it happened. What is documented is that a staple crop of an entire civilization quietly became a weed. That is the lost protein. Not lost in a jungle somewhere, lost in your own vegetable garden, about 4 feet from the tomatoes. Number 9 is lamb's quarters, and it is the one you have been pulling out with the other hand. 4 grams of protein per 100 grams of fresh leaf, which is the highest of any fresh leaf in this video, and about 39% of its calories as protein. You know the plant even if you do not know the name. Dusty gray-green, a whitish bloom on the young leaves that beads water like a duck's back. And it stands up in the middle of a bed you weeded 3 weeks ago as though it had been invited. It is a close relative of quinoa and a closer one to spinach, and it cooks like spinach and holds up better in the pan. The extension people who write the weed sheets on it will tell you outright, in the middle of explaining how to kill it, that it runs higher in protein and iron than the cultivated spinach you buy in a bag. Take the top 4 or 5 inches of the young plants before it flowers. Once the seed heads form, the leaves go tough and dusty, and there is no bringing them back. And if you do let one go to seed, those seeds are grain as well, the same as the amaranth before it. People ate them here for a very long time before anybody thought to call the plant a weed. It is fiddly work for a small return, and I am mentioning it mostly so you understand what kind of plant you have been fighting. Number 10 is purslane, and it is last for a reason I want to say plainly. It is the one on this list that people actively poison. 2 grams of protein per 100 grams and about 40% of its calories as protein, which is more than a ribeye out of a plant most people spray in a sidewalk crack. It is the low, flat, spreading thing with fat little paddle-shaped leaves and reddish stems, and it grows where nothing else will bother to. It is crunchy and slightly sour and slightly salty, and it is very good raw in a salad, which is not something you can say about most of this list. Purslane also carries one thing nothing else here does. It is unusually high in an omega-3 fat for a leafy plant. 100 grams of fresh purslane holds somewhere around 3 to 400 milligrams of it. Now, being straight with you as always, that is the plant form of omega-3, and the human body converts very little of it into the forms you hear about in connection with fish oil. So purslane is a good source of a good fat. It is not a substitute for fish, and anybody who tells you it is has skipped a step. The list ends here, in the cracks of a walkway, with a plant people buy chemicals to kill. Now, how do you actually eat any of this? Because I owe you some arithmetic. If you set out to get 29 grams of protein, one steak's worth, out of leaves alone, you would have to eat more than a kilogram of them. That is a laundry basket of greens. It is not going to happen, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Leaves are not a replacement for meat, and they never claim to be. What they are is protein that arrives without dragging calories in behind it. That is the entire point of the second ruler. If you want more protein in your week without more food in your week, that is what these do, and they do it better than the meat does. The concentrated end of the list, the first 5, is where the actual grams live. A handful of pumpkin seeds on a salad of amaranth and lamb's quarters is the whole video in one bowl. The seeds bring the grams, the leaves bring the share. The other thing worth doing with the bottom 4 is drying them. Nettle and amaranth both dry well, crumble to a coarse green powder, and go into a jar. A spoonful of that stirred into a soup in February is a way of eating an August weed in the middle of winter, and it costs you a sheet pan and a low oven. And there is one more thing worth saying, because it has been repeated wrongly for 50 years. You have probably heard that plant proteins are incomplete and must be carefully combined at the same meal to count. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics addressed that directly in their position on the subject, and their language is about as blunt as that sort of document ever gets. The terms complete and incomplete are misleading, and protein from a variety of plant foods eaten over the course of a day supplies all the essential amino acids. Over the course of a day, not at the same sitting. Nobody has to build a mill like a chemistry set. Now the warnings, and there are 4, and none of them are optional. The first is nitrate. Amaranth and lamb's quarters both pull nitrate out of the ground and hold it in the leaf, and they do it hardest on ground that has been heavily fertilized, and hardest of all in a dry year. The Extension Service at North Carolina State, which is also where you will find it confirmed that pigweed leaves are edible, flags the same plant for nitrate accumulation. Cooking helps less than you would hope. Boiling takes off maybe 1/10 of it, and frying can actually raise the concentration. So take these from ground that has not been pushed with nitrogen, take them young, and do not make them the entire meal for a small child. The second is oxalate. Amaranth, lamb's quarters, purslane, and ordinary spinach all carry it. For most people, it does nothing. If you have ever had a calcium oxalate kidney stone, it matters a great deal. The fix is simple, and it works. Boil them and pour the water off. That removes anywhere from 1/3 to well over 3/4 of the soluble oxalate. And steaming does not do the same job because there is nowhere for it to go. Eating them with a dairy product helps too, for the same reason. The third is the one I promised you back at number 4. Dry beans, and kidney beans in particular, contain a compound that will make you violently ill if the beans are undercooked. Not a little ill. Soak them at least 5 hours, pour that water off, and then boil them hard for a full 30 minutes. And do not cook dry beans in a slow cooker, because a slow cooker may never get hot enough to destroy it and can leave you worse off than no cooking at all. The fourth is about where you pick. Nothing on the bottom half of this list should come from a roadside, a ditch by a field, or anywhere that has been sprayed. These plants concentrate what they are standing in, and that is the whole reason they are good, and it is also the reason they can be bad. So there is the list, and the shape of it is the point. At the top is a crop that costs you a whole season, a drying shed, and an afternoon of stomping on a tarp. At the bottom is a plant you have paid money to kill, and the protein did not thin out as we went down. It changed form, and it stopped costing anything. And that is exactly why you stopped seeing it. We were taught to value food by what it took to get it. That worked well enough when everything was scarce. In a backyard in this country, in this century, it is backwards. And it is the reason the best green on the whole place goes over the fence in a wheelbarrow every August. Next time you are weeding, before you throw that armload out, look at what is in it. Then tell me in the comments which of those 4 weeds is the one that owns your garden and what state you are in, because the answer changes a great deal between one end of this country and the other, and I would like to see the map. I would be grateful if you subscribe to the channel. New videos go up every day. See you next time, friends.